Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Now, to give everyone a bit of background information before we get started. On March 16, 1968, at the very height of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, U.S. Army soldiers from the Company C of the 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Bridge on the 23rd Infantry Division, gathered villagers of My Lai and murdered them. These are men, women, children, and infants. Women and children as young as 12 years old were raped and mutilated. Recorded estimates on those killed differs greatly, ranging from 347, according to the U.S. Army, to 504, according to the Vietnamese government. No one can say that what happened on this day was not an atrocious violation of human rights. Extremely horrific, brutal, and inhumane. However, Lieutenant William Calley was the lowest-ranking officer of Charlie Company that day. The only officer court-martialed and brought before his peers in a military courtroom. This historic court-martial comes down to who is responsible for the events that took place. Is following orders enough reason to justify murder? Is pinning a massacre of this scale on one individual perpetrator appropriate? As you hear testimonies and statements and see and hear voices, these are the questions I pose, in particular to you, members of the jury. With the scope of this case in mind, some of the images that will be shown are graphic in nature and show the aftermath of this massacre. These are the actual images taken on this day, and because they are important to the case, they will be shown. However, this may elicit strong emotions, so viewer discretion is advised. Without further ado, I will now hand it off to the Humanities 10 class, who worked exceptionally hard on this case these last few days. Let's give them a hand.
You may be seated. Lieutenant Calley, please rise. Bailiff, will you read the charges?
With premeditation, Lieutenant Calley did murder more than 70 Vietnamese human beings, males and females of various ages, by shooting them with a rifle. With premeditation, Lieutenant Calley did murder one Vietnamese human being, approximately 2 years old, by shooting him with a rifle.
You are charged with violations of Article 118 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. How do you plead to these charges? The defendant may be seated. Will the government please begin its case?
May it please the court, counsel, and members of the jury. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela Farmer, and today we're all here for the trial of Lieutenant William Calley, accused of leading his platoon to slaughter and wreak havoc on the village of My Lai. My and my team's role is to prove without reasonable doubt that he is guilty of the absolutely devastating events that took place on this day. So let's begin, shall we? On March 16, 1968, Lieutenant Calley was instructed to lead his platoon to My Lai, to search for and destroy enemies. Once entering, not a single person reacted in order to not appear as a threat, knowing the repercussions. The team was not met with resistance throughout the mission, but instead, the village itself was met with violence anyway. Calley then instructed his men to kill every person in the village, kill them with machine guns, and waste them. At one point, he and one of the witnesses, Paul Medlow, forced around 70 villagers, including children, into a ditch and shot them with machine guns after drugging them and disregarding checking them for weapons, which is against the rules of war. As you will hear from our witness, Hugh Thompson, Calley ordered him to gather people into the ditch, which he refused, and went to save and guard other villagers. At this same point, other GIs were instructed to kill everyone in sight, yet they had also decided to rape women and young girls, brutally torture them and other villagers by scalping, cutting out their tongues, and outright beating them bloody. Calley, the person in front of us today, may I add again, was in charge of this platoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my responsibility to prove his guilt, and I would like to add reason for his actions instead of painting a picture of a monster, regardless of the facts we will lay out to prove it. Lieutenant Calley had a friend in his platoon, and at that time had been recently killed in battle, Sergeant George Cox. Every person in his team was grieving and yet knew the casualties of war. They were rightfully angry, but used that anger out on this mission and the people of My Lai. He wasn't just angry, he was enraged, which is the only possible explanation for the atrocities that took place. The cold-blooded killing of infants, ladies and gentlemen. Calley wanted revenge, and that is exactly what he got. Well, how does it feel? Members of the jury, understand that my opposing counsel will try to pin these acts on others, try to point blame. But understand that the bottom line is that Lieutenant Calley ordered his men because he was in charge of them. He has eyes, and he saw the devastation around him and never once asked himself if he should stop or make the team stop. No, instead, he continued the group frenzy, and he is not innocent, and we are here to show that beyond doubt. Make the right decision. The people of My Lai deserve justice. Thank you, Your Honor.
Will the government please call its first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to call out Ron Haverly.
Good morning. May you please state your full name and occupation to the court?
My name is Ron Haverly, and I'm a photographer.
Okay, Mr. Haverly, what were you doing on March 16, 1968, on the day of the My Lai massacre?
And that was the day me and my group, the Charlie Company, landed near the hamlet of My Lai. And as we got there, we heard gunshots. So we went to investigate and figure out what was happening. And we saw soldiers shooting at villagers.
So the soldiers were firing gunshots at the villagers, correct?
Correct.
Did you see Calley harming or killing anyone?
No.
Was there a reason why the soldiers started shooting at the citizens? Did the citizens do any harm or have any weapons on them?
I don't see a reason why they were killing the villagers, and the villagers were not causing any harm or didn't have any weapons.
Were there any women, children, or even infants right where they were shooting?
Yes, there was.
I would like to proceed on from these questions and move on to another subject. So, Mr. Haverly, as the photographer, why did you decide to take pictures of what was happening?
I wanted to show the world what was happening in here in My Lai.
At what point did you start taking the pictures?
I started taking pictures when the soldiers were there and after they left.
What are some graphic things you saw during this time period?
Some of the things that I saw was a soldier shooting down an old man and two children.
Okay, thank you. Who was in charge of your platoon?
Calley.
Calley gave you orders, correct?
Correct.
Referring to Calley, you know that he was shooting into the ditch?
I was just told by the GIs that he was shooting at a ditch.
Do you think the GI will lie to you during this devastation?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Haverly, do these images look familiar to you?
They do, yes.
What are they?
These are the pictures that I took.
Are they altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, may I turn in these images into evidence?
Any objections?
No objections, but we do not admit that they are an admission of guilt on the part of anyone personally.
You may.
Mr. Haverly, does this image look familiar to you?
It does, yes.
All right, can you please explain the background story or meaning of this image?
It shows how the villagers were terrified at this event and afraid for their lives because they were tortured, raped, they could have been killed. Also, a soldier mentioned, even confessed that they were going to cut off their tongues, even scalping others. And also, this picture, I took this picture right before the people in the picture died.
Okay, thank you. So why were the soldiers torturing them or raping them?
I'm not sure why they were raping or torturing them.
Okay, on this second picture, Mr. Haverly, you took this photograph, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can you please explain why you took this picture?
I could show how some villagers survived by either hiding among dead bodies or pretending to be dead.
Did you take more photographs like this one here?
Yes.
Or if so, how did they look like?
Some other pictures that I took were just medics helping the villagers.
All right. Moving on to the third and last picture. Mr. Haverly, can you please explain the background meaning of this photograph presented on the board?
This picture shows that a soldier is destroying and burning down their homes, the village.
Why was the soldier destroying this village? Was there a reason on why he was doing it?
I think they were in a search and destroy type of mission.
What were the soldiers specifically searching for?
I'm not quite sure what were they searching for.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
You would. Would you mind repeating your name for the court?
I'm Ron Haberly.
You were at My Lai, correct?
Yes, correct.
Then why didn't you report the events to a superior officer?
My group and I wanted to be quiet about it.
Okay. Did you personally see Calley firing into the ditch?
No.
But you do recall that he did fire into the ditch, correct?
Yes, correct.
Do you mind stating for the court how exactly you came upon the knowledge of Calley firing into the ditch?
I was told by the GIs that he was firing into the ditch.
Okay. So you heard someone say that he just fired into the ditch?
Correct.
So realistically speaking, the casualties in the ditch could have been due to artillery fire?
Objection, Your Honor. Not asking the question, just stating the point, argumentative. Speculation.
What's your argument for why it's speculation?
Because I'm not asking the question, but stating the point.
What's your defense?
That it could have been something other than what one man said.
Overruled.
The pictures you took, you were paid for them, correct?
Correct.
How much were you paid?
About $35,000.
So you had some financial interest in taking these photos?
Yes.
So you would have had a reason to doctor them?
No. No reason.
Okay. If there was no financial gain in taking these photos, would you have submitted them or released them to the public?
Yes, I still would have.
No further questions, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Would the government call their second witness?
We would like to call Hugh Thompson to stand.
I do.
Will you please state your name and occupation for the court?
Hugh Thompson,
Which branch of the military are you in?
U.S. Army,
What responsibility does that entail?
to protect and defend the U.S.
What was your platoon?
The second,
And who led this platoon?
Lieutenant Stephen Brooks.
Where were you on March 16th, 1968?
I did 3 landings, and one of them we were to help wounded civilians, especially children, and to help rescue them.
Did you encounter Lieutenant Calley in My Lai?
Yes.
And what was happening when you saw him?
He ordered me to take 50 to 100 villagers to the ditch and kill them.
Why did you refuse this order?
Because my job is to help wounded civilians, especially, and to rescue them. So what is the point to have that job that I chose if I'm just going to kill them?
And on the morning of March 16th, 1968, did you send any distress signals?
Yes.
Why?
there was a girl near one of the rice paddies, and she was obviously crying out for help. So I hovered over her, sent a signal, and then after that, a captain approached. He nudged her on the shoulder and shot her. We didn't know what to think of that.
Did you hear any reason or justification from any soldiers about why they were killing the civilians?
A sergeant did say that the only way to help them out was to put them out of their own misery.
Where were you when the massacre started?
I was doing a landing, and yeah, we were just doing the landings and doing our job of rescuing the civilians.
And on that day, how did you know something was wrong?
There were bodies everywhere.
When you flew over an irrigation ditch, what did you see?
A combination of women, children, and old men, either hurt, injured, or just barely alive in the ditch.
Did any civilians seem to be of any harm or hold weapons?
Not that I saw but during the investigations, there were some found weapons in the huts, but not on the villagers.
And what was done to the villagers that day?
They were women and girls were raped or molested, and those who tried to escape would be either way would be killed, and in the end they were all killed.
And what was done to those who were still alive after the violence? Would you like me to move on to the next question?
Yes, please.
Okay. What did you tell the American troops to get them to stop shooting at civilians?
That we would draw fire on them if they continued.
Why did you feel the need to make such an extreme order?
So just because, again, it was my job to help and rescue them, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I let them continue.
What did you tell your superiors when reporting the massacre?
I told them what I saw and experienced, so that huts were being burned down, people were getting shot and killed, and women and girls were being raped and were molested.
Did you feel the murders were justified?
To answer this question, we need to know why they were being killed in the first place. And so Calley Company gave orders. They thought there was a possibility of Viet Cong's guerrillas being into the village, but without any evidence that some of the villagers were Viet Congs. They were just accused or just assumed and were being killed. And the orders were to basically just destroy the whole village.
How do you view the citizens who were in My Lai that day?
Before the massacre, they were, throughout the whole day they were innocent, but in the beginning they were innocent, preparing their breakfast rice and starting their morning chores. During the massacre, they were being injured, terribly treated, killed, and then at the end, they were just all dead.
Do you have anything else to add about Lieutenant Calley?
No.
No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
No, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Will the government call their final witness?
I would like to call for
Can you please state your name and rank for the court?
My name is Paul Medlow, and I'm private first class.
Where were you on March 16, 1968?
I was in Vietnam.
Did Lieutenant Calley give you the order on what to do with the villagers?
At first, he told me that I knew what to do with them. I assumed he meant it was to guard the villagers.
Were you with Lieutenant Calley at the time of the shooting in question?
Yes, I was.
Just to clarify, you witnessed Lieutenant Calley shooting and killing civilians because you were participating, right?
Correct.
Did you witness Lieutenant Calley shooting a child?
I did.
How did you feel at the time of the shooting at the irrigation ditch?
I was very upset, and I was scared, and I was crying.
How many people were roughly harmed?
Roughly 300.
Have you ever discussed the incident before? Why did you refuse to testify when first called?
I didn't want to talk about the incident before because it was very traumatic, and I refused to testify at first on the grounds of self-incrimination. I was given a second chance. I refused again, and ultimately I was given an ultimatum of either testifying today or the U.S. Marshals taking me to prison.
What were your specific duties in the village at My Lai? Did you suspect of any villagers?
I was to search, and I was also to guard the villagers. We suspected there being a heavy presence of Viet Cong.
What did Lieutenant Calley instruct you to do with these people? When he returned, what was said to you? What did you do?
Again, he just said that I knew what to do with them. I assumed he meant it was to guard them. He came back 10 or 15 minutes later, asked why they weren't dead yet, and told me to shoot, and he shot, and I joined in.
Was there an incident involving a small child? Can you describe it?
Yes, there was. One of the other soldiers had told us that there was a small child escaping, and Lieutenant Calley went and searched for him and killed him.
Lieutenant Calley gave you direct orders, correct?
Correct.
One of the orders that Lieutenant Calley gave you, you got. Can you explain how it happened and what you told him after?
It was the morning after the My Lai incident, and we were somewhere else. He told me to go somewhere, and I followed orders as I was told to do and I was taught to do. I ended up stepping on a landmine which blew off my foot. I told Lieutenant Calley that he would pay for this. God would make him pay.
He was in charge of your platoons, correct?
Correct.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
What were your orders pertaining to My Lai?
I was to search the village, and later I was to kill.
Why did you carry out these orders?
I had to. It was mandatory, and it wasn't my place to ask why or to say no.
How did you differentiate between VC and Vietnamese citizens?
There was really no differentiating between the two. We were told that there were no Vietnamese citizens in the village, so we assumed that they were all Viet Cong.
What risks did the citizens pose?
A lot of the citizens, like mothers, would have their babies carrying grenades and bombs and throwing their children at us.
How did the danger surrounding the citizens change how you viewed them? Were you scared?
I was on heavy guard of them. I wouldn't say I was scared, but I was definitely aware of them.
What did you see Captain Medina doing?
I saw him shooting people.
So you assumed that because Medina was doing something, it was right?
I assumed everything was okay.
No further questions, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Does the government rest? The defense may now begin its case.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. I'd like to remind you that despite the seemingly airtight opening by my opposition, both my opposing counsel's opening statement as well as mine are not attempts to prove our cases or convince you that my client is innocent or guilty, but rather to present our cases in the most fair and objective way possible. Additionally, you, the jury, are here to decide the innocence or guilt of my client based on the facts alone. With that, I would like to remind you the charges William Calley is being charged. He's being charged with 2 offenses. Firstly, the murdering of 70 villagers at My Lai, and secondly, the death and murder of a small child. Now, I can't deny that he did murder 70 villagers. I can't truly justify his actions, but I can start to paint a picture of why he did it. He was under direct orders by Captain Medina, as well as being directly overseen by Colonel Henderson and other high-ranking officials. He knew that disobeying these orders could have had him court-martialed, or worse, executed. He knew that directly disobeying these orders from a superior officer could mean life or death for everyone he oversaw. On top of that, he expected a high enemy presence and thus acted accordingly, taking the necessary precautions and procedures in order to maintain the safety of his soldiers and friends. So, I ask, in the court of law, doing what it takes to ensure the safety of you, your friends, and your allies makes you innocent, does it not? But I'll leave that with you. The fact is, My Lai was a tragedy. Over 400 people died due to the assumptions placed by the highest-ranking officials, and Lieutenant Calley, conveniently the lowest-ranking officer there, is now the only one being charged. But I would like to re-emphasize the fact that this was war. Now, I'm not trying to justify his actions or say that he was right in doing what he did. Quite the opposite, actually. The Vietnam War was a war we should have never been in, and I can't actually back that up with any concrete evidence, like a good attorney should, but it was. The simple fact is, it was a mistake. A war fought with tactics and cruelty we will hopefully never see again. So, sadly, My Lai was a massacre, but it was not an anomaly. As you will hear from both the witnesses and the defendant himself, what happened was commonplace in Vietnam. So, I must ask if we can truly blame this one man, this one young man, for the mistakes of everyone, for carrying out orders to protect the safety of his young, poorly trained soldiers while, may I remind you, deep in enemy territory. Can we definitively and categorically say that he's both the most and solely at fault here? If so, could you not convict anyone else there for doing the same? As they were, like Lieutenant Calley, just following orders? Thank you. That is all.
Will the defense call its first witness?
Yes.
Would you mind repeating your name for the court?
My name is Charles West.
What rank were you?
I was a squad leader.
On a previous mission, what were the orders given by Lieutenant Lowe?
Lieutenant Lowe ordered me to kill every man, child, and woman.
Do the orders given by Lieutenant Lowe accurately represent common missions in Vietnam?
Yes.
Were you and your fellow soldiers expected to follow them?
We were.
What would happen if you didn't follow them?
We could be court-martialed and then be killed, maybe.
Did you see Calley at the ditch on March 16th?
I did not.
Did your platoon kill anyone?
We did.
This wasn't prompted by Calley, correct?
It was not.
And he never ordered you to kill anyone?
He did not.
What was his mission classified as?
We were on a search and destroy mission.
In military terms, what does that mean?
We were to kill every breathing, living, crawling, and growing thing.
So you're directed to kill everyone as part of the search and destroy mission rather than just this one?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Will the government cross-examine the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you mind restating your name and occupation for the court?
My name is Charles West, and I'm a squad leader.
Which branch of the military are you in?
The U.S. Army.
Which country have you recently been serving in?
Vietnam.
What was your platoon?
I led both platoons.
Who shot at the first 10 Vietnamese people you encountered?
It was my platoon, but I don't know who started shooting.
Did you feel as if your life was endangered by the citizens of My Lai?
Yes.
And why was that?
We got intel to expect that it was a heavily area of Viet Cong.
Were the civilians visibly armed?
No.
Did the civilians do anything you can pinpoint to justify the casualties?
They did not.
Did you take action on the civilians?
Yes, I did.
Who ordered this? Would you like to move on?
Yes.
Okay. Is it true that a man in your platoon molested a young girl at My Lai?
Yes, it's true.
Did you witness any other rapes or sexual assaults at My Lai?
I did not.
Were you at any time near the irrigation ditch where Lieutenant Calley ordered 75 people to be executed?
Yes, I was.
And what did you see there?
People being shot in a ditch.
Did you see Calley at any time other than the meeting just mentioned?
No.
Do you have anything else you'd like to tell us about Calley?
I do not.
What was Lieutenant Calley ordering soldiers to do?
I never heard him give an order.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Will the defense call their next witness?
We would like to call Ernest Medina to the stand. Thank you. Could you please state your name for the court, sir?
Captain Ernest Medina.
And you were at My Lai the day of the massacre, correct?
Correct.
And what orders did you give before you were sent to My Lai?
To destroy My Lai.
And you were told not to expect civilians and to anticipate a heavy VC presence, correct?
Correct.
And how much training were you given for distinguishing between civilians and VC?
Very little, only a few hours a year.
And due to the guerrilla tactics used by the VC, anyone could have been a VC, correct?
Yes, that is right.
Did you give the order to burn down the huts in the village?
I did.
Did you meet Lieutenant Calley at any point during this?
I did see him, yes.
Did you say anything to him?
I told them to continue killing and increase the body counts.
And just to confirm, you are the commanding officer of Charlie Company, correct?
Yes, that is right. I am the lead commander of William Calley. Yes.
And was one Colonel Henderson also present at My Lai?
Yes, he was.
And where was he?
He was in his helicopter floating over the incident.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Would the government like to cross-examine the witness? Yes.
Good morning. May you please restate your name and military rank to the court?
Ernest Medina, and captain of the industry of the U.S. Army.
All right. Mr. Medina, is it true that you said not to kill women unless they engage you?
Yes.
Okay. Why would you say that? Would you like to move on from this question?
Yes.
All right. Did you ever cause any harm to anyone?
Yes, I did.
Did you see Calley harming anyone?
Yes, I did.
Did Colonel Barker brief you before the mission?
Yes, he did.
He told you that you were permitted to destroy livestock, corpse, etc.?
Yes, that's correct.
But not people, excluding enemies, correct?
Yes.
You were given orders to destroy land and not to harm people, correct?
Yes.
That will be all, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Will the defense call their final witness?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to call Lieutenant Calley. All right. Do you mind repeating your name for the court?
William.
Calley.
William Calley, my bad.
All right. Well, William Calley, were you given any formal training on how to determine Viet Cong versus Vietnamese?
No.
No. And were you to expect heavy Viet Cong presence over at My Lai?
Yes.
So you would have had every reason to believe that everyone, or at least a fair portion of them, would be Viet Cong?
Yes.
Even if they weren't Viet Cong, you would still have fair reason to think that the citizens would pose some sort of threat, correct?
Correct.
What kind of threat?
The parents would strap bombs to babies and throw them at us.
So you had reasonable suspicion of everybody you encountered?
Yes.
All right. Moving on. Were you given any orders by Captain Medina before My Lai?
Yes, I was.
And what were these orders?
The orders were to burn down the village.
So did these orders directly result in a change in your actions and orders?
Yes.
All right. And you would have no reason to doubt Medina's orders?
Yes.
All right. What type of mission was this?
Search and destroy.
And were the actions you took commonplace in Vietnam?
Yes.
Were you given any training that directed you to do something else in missions such as these?
No.
No. So by any reasonable guess, this mission should have gone the same as any other?
Yes.
In Charles West's testimony, he said, "We were to overrun the village, leaving nothing walking, crawling, or growing." Would you say that this is accurate?
Yes.
And that would mean that your actions were not only ordered, but expected?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Would the government like to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm not that sure. Good morning, Lieutenant Calley. Could you please tell the jury your role on the day of March 16th, 1968?
I led my platoon to My Lai.
And who is Sergeant George Cox?
He was my higher-ranking official and also a close friend.
And how did his death affect you and your team?
His death set me and my team in a state of grief.
So you would say that you're upset?
Yes, very.
Did you want to avenge your friend?
Yes.
Okay, now let's talk about the My Lai massacre. Were there 400 plus deaths on that day?
Yes, there was.
And how many enemies were killed?
About 15.
So this ratio would be 400 to 500 villagers to 15 total enemies, correct?
Yes.
On March 16th, when your platoon entered the village, did anyone run or seem to react in any way?
No, there was no running and no reaction anyway.
Do you recall seeing various men, women, and children there, even infants?
I recall seeing enemies.
Now, as we've heard from Paul Medlow, do you remember stating that you were in charge on the day of March 16th?
Yes.
So you were giving orders to your platoon?
Yes.
And did you tell one of the GIs to, quote unquote, waste them, referring to the villagers?
Yes.
Now, what order did Hugh Thompson not follow that you gave based on the testimony he just gave in court under oath?
I ordered him to group up about 75 people and put them into a ditch and shoot them.
And did Charlie Company carry machine guns?
Yes.
And did you give order to use the machine guns on the villagers that day, specifically when you were having your men group the villagers up?
Yes, Captain Medina said that we were running low on time.
And the villagers, they were grouped up into a ditch, correct? Do you remember this ditch at all?
Yes, the enemies were grouped up into a ditch and shot at.
Did you order your men to search for weapons on the villagers?
No.
Did you see any weapons on them?
No.
Are there children in the ditch? Were there?
Yes.
And did Medina explicitly tell you to kill a child or kill children?
No.
Did one of these children try to escape? Because based off of Medlow's testimony, one did.
Yes.
Now, Lieutenant, did you fire into this ditch?
Yes, I considered all to be enemies, so I shot.
I would like to move on from this. Let's talk about the laws. When you were at war in another country, you were required to keep a set of rules in your pocket at all times. As a soldier of the United States, correct?
Correct.
These are called the 9 rules, correct?
Yes.
And 2 through 4 of these rules states that you cannot harm or be rude to any villagers, correct?
Yes.
It says that you are supposed to treat them with respect, correct?
Yes.
Can you, sorry, never mind. Are these rules, you're meant to follow them at all times? You have them in your pocket?
Yes.
What happened at the ditch, does that align with these rules?
No.
Okay, let's summarize for the jury. You shot into a ditch of various villagers, killed a child, and ordered your men to kill various villagers, adding to the total of 500 deaths in My Lai. This all based on this own cross-examination. Does this sound accurate to you?
Yes, there are 500 enemy deaths.
That'll be all, Your Honor.
The witness may be seated. Does the defense rest? Now that all testimony has been given, I will ask the government to sum up its case.
The cord just fell out. Since the amp is plugged in, it might make a little bit of noise, and I'm sorry.
Check. Okay. May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. I'd like to start with the numbers, and here they are. The final casualty count is 504 civilians when counted by Vietnam and 347 civilians when counted by the U.S. Army. Among the victims were 182 women, 17 of them pregnant, and 173 children, including 56 infants. At least those who were found and reported. And I'll ask you, what do you think the victims were doing when they were shot? Were they sleeping, playing, asking their mothers for milk, attending school, running through the forest, wide-eyed and red-cheeked, happy and oblivious? What were they doing? And I'll ask you, who ordered these killings? Who escalated the murder, the cruelty, machine guns and grenades after crying babies and civilians? Who ordered all buildings to be burned down with no order to check for civilians in them beforehand? Calley. These orders were made by Lieutenant Calley. This falls on him. Furthermore, I would like to emphasize the things proven about Mr. Calley today. I urge you to listen to what you've heard today logistically and think about everything on paper. Think about the fact that Calley was reported to have dragged dozens of people, including young children, women, elderly civilians, into a ditch before murdering them with a machine gun. I urge urge you to bring yourself back to Calley's questioning earlier in the trial when he confirmed that he did shoot 70 civilians and sit idly by as he watched his soldiers in his command molest women and young girls. In addition to that, how not a single shot was fired against the men of Charlie Company at My Lai when this happened. I urge you to think about how this could possibly be justified. How did Lieutenant Calley look at innocent civilians and decide to mass murder them? Well, Lieutenant Calley turned to his men and he said to waste them. No witness has reported any threats or visible weapons or violence from My Lai villagers. We know all these things. We heard Mr. Medlow's testimony about being a group of civilians and being told you know what to do with them by Lieutenant Calley. He thought this order meant to protect the civilians. Calley came back 15 minutes later and asked why they weren't dead yet. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the facts, we have the testimonies, and I can only hope we've laid them all out for you as clearly as possible today. The difference between my hope and My Lai hope is that my hope will not be met with an automatic machine gun. I hope, if it's not enough, I will not die. But the similarity between our hope is that if it's not enough, Lieutenant Calley will decide that nothing is wrong. He'll walk away to nature and neighborhoods, and the people of My Lai will never get to do that. Never again. There will be eternal silence in My Lai forever, and forever there will be the shadow of what happened there looming. And I hope this court does not have a similar shadow, but it's not up to hope. It's up to you, jury, and I only hope you make the right decision. Thank you. That'll be all, Your Honor.
Will the defense sum up its arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, members of the jury. Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I'm tall. Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. The fact of the matter is there was nobody solely responsible for the My Lai massacre. It was caused by military ignorance, poor training, faulty intelligence, and top brass not communicating with their subordinates. Lieutenant William Calley was simply following his orders and knew that if he were to question them, even for a second, it could result in the death of his fellow soldiers or getting himself court-martialed. And may I remind the court that they were behind enemy lines and in a free fire zone, meaning that for the safety of not only himself, but for the safety of his soldiers, he had to suspect everyone of being an enemy. Wait, hold on, sorry. Meaning that for not only the safety of his... I'm sorry, this is formatted terribly. I should not have done this. And with that, the force they took was justified in helping protect the men underneath him. Lieutenant Lowe gave the order to kill every man, woman, and child. Captain Medina gave direct orders to Lieutenant Calley to speed up his shooting of civilians and gave the order to burn down the village. Colonel Henderson watched the incident from a helicopter and did nothing as the lower-ranking men beneath him shot civilians with machine guns, tossed grenades into huts, and burned down the entire village. And I would also like to repeat one more time that they were instructed to expect Viet Cong, and due to their lack of training in differentiating between Viet Cong and Vietnamese citizens, and also the guerrilla tactics used by the VC, anyone could have been an enemy combatant. He was simply trying to protect himself and his comrades, and he did what he was meant to as a U.S. soldier. Thank you.
Jury, I will ask you to deliberate on the two charges against the accused. Firstly, the murder of 70 villagers in one incident. Secondly, the murder of a young child in another. To convict Lieutenant Calley, 2/3 of you must come to the conclusion that Calley is guilty. The bailiff will now take you out to deliberate. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
What is the verdict?
Oh, guilty. I'm guilty on both counts.
president of this court to inform you that you are sentenced as follows. First, you are to be confined to hard labor for the length of your natural life. Second, you are to be dismissed from the service and to forfeit all pay and allowances. This court is closed.